Welcome back to my presentations on the Generation 2 Elite Specializations from Path of Fire. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the Engineer's next Elite Specialization, that being the Holosmith. I think that before this demo started, a lot of people were looking at the Weaver maybe, and a couple of other Elite Specializations as their favorite, but the Holosmith has really risen to the top here, and a lot of people are really having a lot of fun. Now, how much it is the flavor and the design and the actual stuff core to Holosmith that people like, as opposed to just the fact it's hitting like a truck, I don't know. But I want to show you guys exactly how this new Elite spec works and some more of the Gen 2 goodness.
Holosmiths are engineers who've learned to project the power of light into a semi-solid form. They supplement their technical genius by wielding swords. In their Photon Forge mode, they gain access to powerful new skills. Each skill generates heat, which can cause damage to them as the temperature rises. Their utility skills take advantage of this, gaining greater power when their heat level exceeds a threshold.
So here we have a Holosmith, who I've called the Holofancer, and we've got some pretty cool stuff to show. Now, the Weaver that I did my previous presentation on was kind of ridiculous, and it took us ages just to get through the new weapon skills. This guy we can get through a lot quicker. So the new weapon available for this specialization is, once again, the sword. We're doing 2 sword ones very, very quickly here. And sword, they get just 3 skills, 3 simple new abilities that we can run through very, very quickly. The main thing with this character, though, is the loss of their F5 on their elite skill and the gaining of essentially an entirely new skill bar and a new kit that they can play with in addition to the sword, and that is when you go into your Photon Forge mode. So the lore, the story of this guy is that they've kind of combined Zephyrite techniques, I think it is, with some other stuff to be able to build lots of holograms and hard light things that allow them to do ridiculous damage. So all of your abilities are about this kind of light technology. So, for example, we can create an arena here, which gives us boons and stuff while we're stood inside it. We can use our new elite skill, which is a ridiculous giant laser beam of doom out of the new light abilities, and generally fun stuff like that. We can carry the light abilities around us and do damage in a circle around us. We can put a shield of it up and then fire the shield at various targets of ours, whatever we like the sound of. So that's the idea, and it's got a very cool heat gaining mechanic. This guy is a huge damage dealer, massive YOLO spec as it would seem, and especially the default tuning, he hits really, really, really goddamn hard. So the default loadout that the devs give us here on these little test characters is sword shield. So I'll show you guys that as best I can here. And don't forget, because we're an engineer, we not only get a full new set of utilities, but we also get tool belt versions of those abilities that we can look at also. The only ability that doesn't have a tool belt equivalent is the new laser beam, prime light beam attack, because you don't get F5s anymore, like I said. So that's kind of one of the main trade-offs with the spec, and I'll show you that straight away. So the first minor, it says Photon Forge replaces your elite tool belt skill, and we gain access to exceed abilities. So yeah, that's what all the utilities are. They're called exceeds. And pretty much everything that the Holosmith does plays with a mechanic to do with heat, which I'll get into very, very quickly. But you'll notice my F5 here, which is bound to Q for me. If I put on Supply Crate, this should become, if we turn off Holosmith here, we get Medpack drop, or if we use Mortar Kit, we get Orbital Strike, and so on and so on and so on. Well, the Holosmith loses those. Watch, when we click it, we lose it. We instead get this, which is to engage Forge mode or to deactivate Photon Forge mode. So how does this work? Well, much like the Elemental, the Weaver, I should say, we have a bar, again, above our skills but below our F abilities. This time it's a heat bar. So think of it a little bit like building Shroud on a Necromancer or building Adrenaline on a Warrior. As we do things in fights, it will build and build and build. But the idea of this is we want to have heat, but we don't want to overheat. And I'll show you how this works. So I'm going to press Q here, and our lovely, awesome, sword-wielding Holosmith, who we've not really talked about very much just yet. When we press Q, we're going to enter his special mode, and known as the Photon Forge. So ready? Boom. And this is what we look like now. It's totally crazy and fancy. And you'll notice that when we did that, our utilities didn't change, our tool belt skills didn't change, but our weapon skills did. We have 5 new weapon skills. Now, the first 3 look kind of like the sword abilities, you might, or at least the first 2 look like the sword abilities still. But we're not actually technically on sword at the moment. This is a totally new set of skills. So, for example, if I go to a core engineer weapon, like the rifle, for example, and then we enter Photon Forge, you'll see we get these kind of sword-looking abilities again. It doesn't actually matter what our regular weapons are. While we're in the Photon Forge, then we get these 5 abilities, and that's just the way it works. What also happens is that while we're in the Forge, we can't use kits. So some people thought this might be a really heavy kit user, but it's not. So if we use, say, the grenade kit, regular engineer, well, and the Holosmith as well, just not while they're in the Forge, you can throw your grenades and stuff, right? And you can use your engineer kit. But if we enter the Photon Forge, it puts the grenade kit on cooldown, as you can see here, for as long as we're stuck in the Forge. Now, if I use this, and I try to hold a grenade kit while I'm in this mode, it kicks me out of the mode. So kits can be used on this class, on this elite specialization, I should say, but they're not the be-all and end-all, and the main thing, which is the Photon Forge, you're not going to be using kits with. So again, that's an example there of the new elite specialization sort of actually taking stuff away from you in order to make the elite specialization feel very distinct and like a subclass. And where you lose access to kits, you gain access to a ton of other stuff and ridiculously overtuned skills. That's a Holosmith in the background there, actually attacking things, as you can see, doing ridiculous damage. Okay, so let's talk again about the heat. So we're going to go into Photon Forge mode. We look cool. We've got our special new abilities. We can do pretty much anything we like except equip kits. And now you'll notice that my bar is charging. So we are gaining heat. As I mouse over here, you can see I've got 20 out of 100 heat. And the UI doesn't refresh. We have to manually refresh it. But now we've got 30. And it says out of 100. Basically, as we gain heat, and now you'll notice our color, as we're over 50%, our color has changed. A lot of our skills want us to have heats. So, you know that arena I built earlier? If I build the arena now that I'm very hot when I do it, look at how big it is. It's much bigger now. And that's because pretty much everything you're doing, if you have heat, it supercharges your skills and even some of your traits. And we get a nice little red bar that tells us when we're over 50 heat, over generally halfway, right? So that's most of what your utility skills would be. If we mouse over, it says, look, heat threshold 50, heat threshold 50, 50, 50, 50, 50. So as a Holosmith, what you want to do is always be over 50 heat. But now you're wondering, okay, well, why can't I just stay in Photon Forge mode forever, always have tons of heat, and just get supercharged, super powerful utilities all the time? Why doesn't that work, wooden potatoes? Well, I will show you guys. We'll wait a couple of seconds for this to hit the max. So here we go. Now we're in like super hot mode. You can see the UI is starting to go crazy, and it's not looking good. We're starting to worry about things. We're starting to worry. And now that we're max, we've been kicked out. We've taken a huge explosion of damage, and now we are draining health as well from the overheat, and that's put major damage on us. Now, what's even worse is while we're cooling down because we overheated, we actually can't re-enter the Photon Forge mode at all. Normally, you can dip in and out of it once every 5 seconds, as you can see here, or every 5.25 seconds, because I'm traded for tools, which makes it go low. We'll talk about that soon. But so you can dip in and out pretty comfortably. So in, out, in, out, in, out, that's fine. However, if you overheat, if you get to the point where you've got too much, you take a ton of damage, and you won't be able to re-enter at all for a long period of time, and that's going to be a real issue for you, especially if you get some of your sustain from that mode, which we'll talk about soon based on certain trait setups. So that is the core. You will have seen this in loads of different games. It's basically an overheating thing you see in a lot of different shooters and RPGs and so forth. So let's have a look first of all at the sword and what exactly it's capable of. I won't even equip an offhand here. So it's so simple compared to the Weaver. It's a breath of fresh air. So we have an auto attack chain here. So you get one attack, rolls into the second, rolls into the third. By the way, I know this is my Holosmith presentation, but I will just point out the other crazy thing about Weaver was Core Ellie never got auto attack chains, really. They were very frugal with that kind of stuff. They did it on the conjure weapons, but they didn't on the regular things. Weaver not only gets all of those new skills and mixes and things, but it also has auto attack chains. I don't know if you guys noticed that. But anyway, so here's our chain. First we get Sun Edge, strike your foe and inflict vulnerability. This attack gains additional crit chance based on your heat level. So if we have over 50% heat, guess what? We're critting much more frequently with that, 25% more frequently. So you really want to keep around that level. Then we got Sun Ripper. And we strike our foe again, and we inflict vulnerability, and it gains additional crit chance based on our heat level. Same thing. So Sun Edge into Ripper. And then finally, the final one is Gleam Saber. Now, Gleam Saber is really cool because what it does is it reduces the recharge of your other sword abilities. And this only comes at the end of the chain. So it's every 3 auto attacks, you recharge your other sword abilities. And again, it crits more frequently if we have some heat. So you might think that like your auto builds heat, but it doesn't, right? So I'll just keep attacking this guy here, and we're not actually building heat. We're just rolling through. This is what the sword autos look like. They're very nice, a little bit floaty. They feel generally like sword has in Guild Wars 2 before. And you're going to want to incorporate a lot of this in and land a lot of these hits while you play this thing so that you can get access to your other 2 sword skills as much as possible. Now, so skill 2 is just basically a big hitting ability. Strike for a refraction cutter, strike foes in front of you, and launch a blade of light at your target. You launch extra blades based on your heat level, and each blade inflicts conditions. So this is what it looks like with no heat. So there you go. You saw that little like rockety looking thing coming off there. And now I'll build up 50% heat, and I'll show you guys what that looks like. 1 second. So here we go. We're over 50% heat. I'm going to drop out of the forge, which will start cooling us down as soon as we do. I'm going to drop out of the forge, and we use the 2. And there you go. You can see your more things come out there. And now we got a higher crit chance on the autos as well. I don't know whether there's an animation change on that. And then lastly, we've got Radiant Arc. So we leap to our target. We create an arc of light that strikes nearby foes, and we gain quickness and more if we are over a certain amount of heat, 50%. It's nearly always 50% heat, so you just want to be over halfway. So here, it's a gap close, and we get some quickness, and that quickness lets us auto-attack very quickly. So now what I want you guys to do is I'm going to use, I'm going to use the skill 2 and the skill 3, right? So that our cooldowns are up. And now watch what happens as I use the auto chains. You'll notice that they're chunking down, right? So 7-second cooldown, and then we finish an auto chain. Hold on. We finish an auto chain. We finish an auto chain. Here we go. So we'll use this, and then this. I should just go to the heavy golem. And now watch. There you go. So then it chunked from 11 to 8. And then we're going to attack this guy. And so they recharge super, super, super quickly, all right? Just as long as you're still landing those autos. And the quickness from Radiant Arc is nice because it speeds up your auto so that you can cool down Radiant Arc even faster. As you can see there, we're already back, right? We're back in action. So that's the way that the sword works. Really quite simple. Now, the only way you build heat, though, is not just from being in the forge mode. Because if that's all it was, then you'd build it super slowly and it would feel a bit crap. The forge abilities actually build heat. Okay, so we're always passively gaining it, but we'll gain it too, just from using abilities. So now let's look at our Forge auto, which feels a lot like the sword, but it's not the same stuff, okay? This is a special, different set of abilities called Light Strike into Bright Slash and then Flash Cutter. And here you'll notice that we're gaining heat as we use it. 2%, 2%, 2%. Every time we swing this, we gain another 2% very quickly. So yeah, we just do tons of damage. You'll notice that now we're on 1,000, 1,000, and then 1,600 just from attacking. And this is all it's going to do. It's just crazy power damage. That's all we care about. But look at how fast we're building heat now as we use this auto chain. And the damage is crazy. So massive swings on this, big cleaves. We're no longer 3 targets, we're 5 targets on the autos in the forge. And you'll notice how quickly I almost overheated there. How fast that actually happened. Now, we put out ridiculously crazy damage as we did it, but it did go through pretty quick. You also notice, by the way, as we lose heat, we lose it faster and faster progressively. So yeah, I'll show you that once again. These are the autos in the forge mode. Just tons of strikes here, multiple hits, 5 target cleaves, and just obscene damage. So that is the sword stuff in the forge. We shouldn't really call it that. It's just the forge auto. Cool, over there, we keep getting the training NPCs aggroed on us and attacking us. Okay, so we're going to come over here. Now, the 2 in the Forge is actually not so much about damage, okay? Now, it's called Hollow Leap. It's a pretty interesting skill. It's a gap closer, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to create a pad under our feet, and we're going to leap forward off of it, and we're going to get swiftness as we go. And other people can use that pad too. I don't know if they'll leap on this pad as they use it, but I'm pretty sure that they can at least get swiftness from it as they go, right? And so here you'll notice, by the way, these abilities don't gain additional effects when you're on higher heat. They just generate heat. So all of your regular stuff get extra effects, but when you're in the Forge mode, it's just about building the heat, if that makes sense. So you want to build a load of heat in the Forge mode and then come out and use your other utilities and stuff like that, generally speaking, right? So here we got Hollow Leap, and there's some interesting traits and things to do with that. I think people were talking about turning that into super speed or something. We'll see soon. Here we got Corona Burst. Corona Burst is ridiculous and can be traded in some interesting ways. It's a giant radius around you, a big nuke on lots of people around you. Strike nearby foes and begin to store up energy, gaining boons and heat every pulse. And then after charging, that energy explodes, inflicting conditions, which is vulnerability on people. Okay, so I'll show you guys what this looks like. We're going to use Corona Burst and hit him. Now we're going to gain, and then boom, we're going to do a secondary strike there again afterwards, which is going to give us a load of heat and lots of other stuff. So I want to find... Here we go. Nobody's over at these ones. I'll show you guys what this looks like from a standing position with these targets around us, and you'll see just how much AoE there is on this Corona Burst. So we can hit all 3 golems, and then we charge up, and we hit all 3 again, okay? And we get a ton of heat as we do so, and we vulnerability the hell out of them, also giving ourselves a ton of might. Now, we'll come back to this soon later, because there's some very interesting traits that you can play around with on that. And there we go, we just killed the friggin' thing. It's so ridiculous. Like, the main thing about this is it hits so hard. It's absolutely ridiculous. Okay, so hold on. Let's just quickly kill this. All right, so there you go. That's your 3 in Photon Forge. Moving on to the 4, we got Photon Blitz. And this is like an unload. Okay, so this is a 600 range pistol attack, really. It's not actually pistols, they're hollow attacks. Fire multiple piercing blasts at your target. This is 8 burns, so there is some condi on this. I'm not quite sure how you'd want to build it. I think there's a trait that puts some condi out as well. So yeah, if we watch this, this is pierces. This will go through people, you know, whole lines. It's kind of like getting your own thief unload. So it's a nice thing that you can do from range. And again, you're going to gain some heat when you do it. It will pierce through a group of 5 targets all at once. And then very quickly, here we got Holographic Shockwave. Create a deadly shockwave that launches foes and just does a ton of damage. There we go. We overheated as we cast that there. And this also always crits. So this is like an arcane ability from the Ellies. Always crits without fail. So you can run something that's just like crazy ferocity, but doesn't necessarily have much precision, and get just these massive AoE nukes on people. Kind of like some of those old Sigil of Intelligence rotations people would do on Eviscerate Warriors and stuff back in the day, I don't know. But obviously not reliant on the Sigil itself. And also you get a huge amount of heat on that, 25% heat instantly the second you use it. And it's a launch with 0 distance, by the way. And you might wonder why the devs have done that. You launch the enemies, but you don't send them anywhere. Now, the reason they've done that, we actually saw that on the Daredevil back during the Heart of Thorns days with their elite. Now, the reason they've done that is because that actually interrupts downstate bodies. It functions like a stun, but you can use that to interrupt people who are downstate. You can use that to interrupt a warrior who's in the middle of throwing a hammer at you or in the middle of vengeancing or something like that. And so that's going to be more of a PvP-oriented thing. Also might affect the amount of break bar damage it does for PvE or something. I'm not entirely sure. So there you go. That's the Photon Forge mode. It is just... And maybe I haven't shown it to you guys well enough, but it is incredibly brute forcey, damagey, horrendously scary. And I think this is on like a random crappy just single sword here that I haven't, you know, because we don't have the shield on. So we're not even, we don't even have all the attributes we should have here. Oh my god, breaking combat is such a nightmare here. This is outrageous. So yeah, we'll put that back on, right? And we can, you know, we'll get even more stats. It's really crazy. So yeah, that is the Photon Forge mode, and it just does absolutely, I mean, maybe this hasn't been evidenced enough for you guys just yet, but it absolutely hits like a truck. It is incredibly dangerous and super, super, super fun. The only problem is, every now and then, if you go too crazy with it, you're going to overheat, as you can see I did there. But so what can we do with this heat? Well, let's have a look at the utilities, shall we, before we move on to the traits, which is really where the Holosmith becomes very, very, very fun. So first of all, we've got our heal. This is Coolant Blast. It's an exceed. It heals yourself and chills nearby foes. Now, if you're above 50% heat when you do it, you also get Frost Aura, and you'll keep healing for a duration afterwards. Frost Aura, of course, is 10% less incoming damage, which is great. And you'll notice the effect you get for being over 50% heat, the cooling vapor. That's really actually quite strong. That's 4 seconds and 1,328 heal. All right, so I'll just build up to 50% here, and I'll show you guys what this looks like. Boom, so there you go. And we get to heal quite a lot with our cooling vapor there. Moving on, we've got these exceeds. There's 4 of these. So first we've got the Photon Wall, a defensive barrier that appears in front of you and blocks you and your allies from incoming attacks. Now, if you double click it, then you can fire it out at people, and it grants projectile reflection if you are above the heat threshold. So here's what it looks like with no heat, and it moves around with you. And then I can, oh, I didn't quite throw it. I showed you earlier throwing it out, and you can throw it out at people. where it will do a bit of damage. Launch Wall, it inflicts vulnerability, and when you're above the heat threshold, it will fire multiple walls. Okay, so here we'll build up some heat now. And I'll show you what this looks like when you're over 50. It's kind of like there's two versions of every skill, a normal one and then a supercharged one, which is very fun because it's kind of like what Engineer was doing with Gadgeteer, if you guys recall, with the gadget traits, which only just changed, but that was all about like overheating your utilities. And it feels like now that they've changed that, they've decided to sort of go crazier with it, specifically for Holosmith. So here we go, here's the advanced version of the wall. Big wall, that reflects, and then we fire 3 out at once, and all 3 of them hit the golems. I'd love to say that was planned. It absolutely was not. So I think that's all pretty cool. Let's just quickly clear these up so that we can get out of combat here. Okay, so of course, as well, not only do we get the Photon Wall, but we get tool belt skills also. So on top of that, we get Particle Accelerator. Fire a crippling bolt of light at your target. Allies that the bolt passes through are granted swiftness, and projectile velocity is increased while above the heat threshold. That swiftness on allies, I think, is really quite boring. So it moves very fast, like 100% velocity increase when we're over the heat threshold. So I'll show you guys this. What's the range on it? It's at 1,000 range as well, so this should be pretty cool to see. So from all the way back here, boom, we get to fire it in, and the regular version is much slower. Now you'll notice the cooldown on this is only 7 seconds. Particle Accelerator is a lot, and here's the slower version, is a lot like Surprise Shot, which engineers already get when they just run rifle turrets. So I wonder why the devs did that. I mean, I've always kind of liked Surprise Shot because I think it's a really interesting skill, but they basically just gave us another version of Surprise Shot here. And you can, of course, run both together. So if I swap on a rifle turret here, you guys will notice we can go like Particle Accelerator, Surprise Shot as we're attacking, right? And of course, we can use that while we're in the Photon Forge mode as well, and building heat to help these abilities be stronger. Oh god, I cancel cast that. But so you can use both. They don't interrupt your animations. I mean, they're both on a 7-second cooldown. This is basically just like a stronger version of Surprise Shot. Because it's attached to an elite specialization instead of anything else. And I wonder whether people will be spamming these in raids and things now going forwards. I did also forget to show you guys, but Coolant Blast, of course, also has an F1 too. This is Cauterize. This is essentially a reference to a Guild Wars 1 skill that the Paragon had, which was in Alona, which is the region that this game's going back to. It's called Cauterize. The Guild Wars 1 version of this was called Cautery Signet, where the Paragon would take all the conditions and wounds from everyone in the team, cleanse them all, and apply burning to themselves for each condition. And this is the same thing here. Use a laser to burn off conditions and set yourself on fire for each one that you remove. And it removes additional conditions if you're above the heat threshold. So I don't know how this self-burning works. Does this mean if we're on a Condi build, we really hurt ourselves with self-burning? Fun stuff, but yeah, there's a double Condi cleanse or a quadra Condi cleanse if you have some heat when you use it. All right, so there we go. So that's Photon Wall. Moving on, we've got Laser Disc. We create a rotating laser blades to damage nearby foes, and the skill has increased duration when it's activated above the threshold. So just increased duration. I don't know whether this has an animation change, but so here, this is just pulsing damage on top of all of this other ludicrous stuff you've been watching here. So you can just run around, charge it. Oh, we saw that in the original trailer that the devs did that I started this video off with. So you can see this here. And now what we'll do is we'll build up some heat. Kill these guys, and we'll recast this while we're over 50% heat once it's cooled down. Okay, and so here's the supercharged laser disc. No, I don't think it looks any different. And so this now lasts much longer. I think that PvE players will really be enjoying the laser disc and using this quite a lot. So the tool belt for the laser disc is this up here. This is Blade Burst. We fire holographic blades at foes within range, and we do extra damage when we're over the heat threshold. So there's very unlikely to be an animation difference here. But so this is what this looks like. You also saw I bounced something out there. That's static discharge there. So here, over 50% heat. I will cast it now. There you go. It didn't really look any different at all. Just a quick little bursty attack there. Moving on, we've also got the Hard Light Arena. So you guys already saw this earlier. It's create a holographic arena that grants us boons when we're inside of it. This isn't like a Guardian thing that knocks people over when they go into it. It's not that. It's just a light field for you. And yeah, you get protection, regen, and fury. Protection, of course, being the really, really, really major thing here. And if you use it when you've got a lot of heat, it goes really big. I'll show you it with the heat version again just now, because I do love the heated version of this. It looks so pretty. So here we can pop it while we're in the forge, and we get kind of this big area. to dump down on a node or wherever you care about, and you're going to be pulsing a lot of these boons out. I guess it probably does it for allies as well. The tooltip doesn't say that it goes on allies, but I would assume it goes on allies. It would be a bit of a weird skill if it didn't. But yeah, so there you go. You've got the arena, and the tool belt on it is Prismatic Singularity. We collapse a ring of holograms to pull towards a single point, and then it explodes when it fully collapses. Now, interestingly, this is actually designated as an explosion, which means it has all those synergies with the explosives line for regular NG stuff. And this is another one that it basically just gets bigger when you have the heat. So once again, we will go forge mode. We will give ourselves a ton of heat. Oh, is this? I think that might be 2% heat for every projectile that lands, which is crazy. So you can build that up very quickly, and then here we've got our rings, and you can see you can pull everyone in like that. That's actually really nice, and I'm hoping that that will function as quite a worthwhile... Like, a lot of those kind of portal abilities that have existed in Guild Wars 2 so far are kind of fiddly to use and not great, but this one really seems to pull in very tightly, like more tightly than, say, Guardian's Greatsword 5 does, and I hope that that's going to be some kind of, like, temporal curtain sort of capability that the Holosmiths will actually be able to tap into. So you go, there is one more utility as well, of course. So we've seen the wall, we've seen the hard light arena, we've seen the laser disc. Lastly, we've got the Spectrum Shield, okay? So we're going to break stun, then we'll create a shell that reduces damage, and that's going to be some barrier for us. And also, it recharges faster. So this one's very, very simple. This is your little Sunbreak. Usually when we get a new selection of utilities in this game, they make one of them a Sunbreak. And so this is the one we see here. So we pop our Sunbreak here, and it's 50% damage reduction. Very, very, very high amount of damage reduction. And we'll stack on top of any other effects and sources that you can get for that. So that's pretty cool, and, well, it makes sense why it does what it does. So here, now that we've got the heat, right, when I tap this, you're going to watch, it's going to immediately start on half. Do you see how much quicker that recharges? 50% quicker recharge if you have the heat. So you really want the heat for a lot of this stuff. Finally, the tool belt that's on this is Flash Spark. We release a blinding burst of light from our holographic emitter, and when we're above the threshold, it also gives us light aura. So I'm not even going to use that on a golem. But there you go. Very defensive ability. And it's nice to see a bit of light aura there, because it makes sense thematically for this specialization. Oh, and then of course we do have the elite. So the elite is a giant laser, prime light beam. This is my favorite kind of elite in the game. You know, you got kind of, this is sort of very different to, say, the Berserker's headbutt, right? You know, long cooldown, just a big ass hit. I love elites like this, kind of like the new Necro elite that they got, not Scourge, just the change to Plague into Plague Lands. So we charge up and fire an explosive beam of light, and when we activate above the heat threshold, it leaves behind a burning holographic field. So of course we're going to show that off. Now there is no tool belt version of this, because we lose our tool belts to get into the forge. Our tool belt 5, sorry, our elite one. Okay, so here we go, and we're above the heat threshold of 50%. We'll use it on this big guy. Boom. And so yeah, it's an immense CC, great for if lots of people are fighting over down states or whatever. Totally unblockable. It's a launch with some distance on it with 5 targets, and then it burns the hell out of people and cleaves anybody that might have been there. Absolutely, truly nutty. And on a 60-second cooldown. So there you go, guys. Those are the utilities. That's the sword. That's your new F abilities. So now we get to look at the traits. And you might be thinking, oh, so you've seen the bulk of it. You kind of get what this is like now. And it's just all big, massive, meaty swings. But the traits are actually really fun. I love what they've done with the traits here. And I can't wait to show you guys. So, Holosmith. First minor, get a sword, get the Photon Forge, get the new utilities. That's cool. Second minor, which we will always have, means that when we are cooling down, we get health. All right, so you can cool down in 2 different ways. One, you can overheat and you're forced to cool down. You can't go back in the forge. Or I can be, you know, at 50% here and I can drop out and I'll start cooling down now. And as I'm cooling down here, I'm actually gaining health from heat therapy. All Holosmiths will get this because it's a minor. They will be doing this. Now, you'll notice that it says this does not function if you've overheated. So remember, there's a difference between just regularly cooling down and overheating. So you definitely don't want to overheat. You take a big packet of damage, you take pulsing damage afterwards, you can't go back into the forge, and you're not going to get heat therapy. All right, so that's a lot you lose. And then finally, we have Laser's Edge, that while we are active in the forge and we're above 50% heat, we gain 15% more damage. 15% damage modifier. That's huge. On a minor, that is huge. And again, so it's just all a game of being over 50%. All right, so let's look at the middle line first, which I think will be the first one you unlock in PvE. Let's just verify that, shall we? Because if this is true here as well, then it's true for all of them. So what do we go for? We get Prismatic Converter and then Crystal, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that is the way they've done it. So let's have a look at this one. This line is much more about quality of life, I would say. First, we get Prismatic Converter. Now, what this means is when we leave Forge, that's a skill. It's called Deactivate Photon Forge. When we leave it, we convert any conditions we have us into boons. And very interestingly there, you'll notice that we get 1 boon just regularly, or 1 condition cleanse that turns into boons regularly. Then we get 2 when we're over half heat. Then it actually says at the bottom there that we get 3 if we're over 100% heat. Now, how does that work? Well, that will make sense in just a second. I will talk about that very soon. But yeah, so that's really strong as well, guys. Imagine that someone tries to fear you away when you're in your Forge mode. If you drop out of Forge then, that will convert that fear into stability for you. If you're burning and you're in the Forge, when you dip out, that will give you Aegis just from leaving them. So that's very, very, very strong. Okay, that's not just cleanse, it's conversion. Super powerful. Moving on, we got Crystal Configuration Eclipse. So Corona Burst, now this is the skill 3 in the Forge. This gets augmented a lot with this trait, and very much for sustain, which I alluded to earlier in the video. So it gives us stability on each attack, and it creates a barrier for each target struck. So we all know what barrier is at this point. This is incredibly strong. So it's at the big point AoE, not point blank, it's just the big AoE burst around us. Okay, now this can hit 5 targets. We're only going to hit 3 here. But it can hit 5 targets, and as you can see there, it's traded to give us barrier and stab. So watch. We're going to pop in. We're going to gain stability. Super useful. I think what most people will do when they're running that trait is they're going to go into Forge and they're going to immediately do that. Because then they're getting barrier to keep them alive and they're getting stability to help them wail on their targets. And you can use some other abilities before coming and using it again. It's also not too crazy heat generation. I mean, if you cleave 5 targets both time with it, it's going to be a lot of heat. And so that's Corona Burst. That's what that does. Lots of quality of life. Almost necessary quality of life, really, to have that stab so that you can continue wailing your hits away. And like I say, I'm sure you will drop into the Forge and use the 3 before then going further. So with that done, now let's look at the Grandmasters. Now, I love the Grandmasters on the Holosmith. They feel a lot like, do you guys remember the Daredevil from Heart of Thorns and how it had 3 Grandmasters that were all really build defining and they were all really flavorful and they all had like pretty big augments to the playstyle of the Elite Spec? Well, the Generation 2 version of that in my mind is undoubtedly the Holosmith. Each Grandmaster plays with the mechanics in a very fun way. So let's look at this one first. This increases our maximum heat capacity to over 100%, okay? And when we're over 100%, we get lots of might. So this is a Grandmaster that says, okay, you like the way that the heat generation and stuff works, well, let's just give you more quality of life on it. A bit like Necros that can extend the amount of life force capacity that they have. The might is obviously a benefit, but what's even cooler about this, and what I really like about this Grandmaster, is now that our capacity is higher, there are certain skills and traits that will key into that. So remember how most of the abilities so far have given us an extra benefit above 50 heat? Well, when you pick this Grandmaster, some of those gain an additional tier. And we've actually already seen that. Remember that Condi cleanse one we saw earlier that gave us 3 cleanses or 3 conversions at above 100%? Well, now you see how that works. It's because of this Grandmaster, which unlocks a deeper potential in certain areas of the Holosmith. How badass is that? So look, right now, we're at 100%. Anyone else would get kicked out, but because of our Grandmaster, we're still in here. We're still in. And so that is where, if we go back, Prismatic Converter has conditions to boons over 100% heat. It's because if you trait for this, you get extra stuff, all right? So if I turn that off and we mouse back over, look, it only reads conditions to boons 2. But if we turn it on, it goes to conditions to boons 3. And so that's so cool, I think. So this is like a high capacity heat build, where you got lots of heat in here, lots of quality of life. That's what the middle line is all about, all right? So I guess I want to show you the bottom line. So how else might they be able to change things? The bottom line is very interesting as well, okay? So first we get solar focusing lens. This means that our first few attacks after we enter the Photon Forge will inflict burning, and it was also granted if we overheat. Okay, so you might see the idea here. So far, everything we've been looking at has been telling us don't overheat. It will take you longer to overheat, and you know it's bad to overheat. The bottom line is all about embracing overheating. So when we dip into the Forge, we can attack people and put them on fire, right, with 2 attacks. And then if we overheat, we get another 5 burn on our attacks just because of this trait, all right? Now, this one here is our Holo Leap will now remove movement impairing conditions. And here also, and this is the very cool bit, it turns the swiftness we get on that ability into super speed. So remember, that's the 2. This is this one here. Where we get this pad. Now, this pad is actually giving us super speed. So this is very melee. It's like we saw with the Weaver. So having super speed on there is super useful. And this just kind of means we can spam this a ton. Look at how little heat we're getting. We can just spam this and use it. And don't forget, this is given to allies. So think about World versus World right now. Your Zergs in World versus World. People will be running onto those pads for just incredible super speed. Like, whole Zergs of people will be able to do this if you're traded like this. So that's going to be super, super, super strong. And it removes chills and cripples and stuff as people go through, and a mob. So yeah, very, very, very interesting stuff. And that's a big change for Holo Leap. Not too much to do with the overheat here. And now finally the Grandmaster. This is the really interesting one. Photonic Blasting Module. The first thing we need to pay attention to here is that overheating now blasts damage to enemies around us. So a lot like the original traits, where we get extra burning damage after overheating. This one actually now just is a big flat packet of damage, and that's a lot of damage. Look at that tooltip, 2,700 damage. There's a huge amount of damage when we overheat, so we deliberately want to. Also, it won't do the big initial packet of damage to us when we overheat. So that's super fun as well. Now, it's less punishing for us to overheat. We do a ton of damage on it. We put some burnout. And we also get Laser's Edge, which is another 15% damage modifier after overheating. So remember, we've got this minor. So we'll be at 15% more damage when we're over 50% heat. And then we're going to overheat and keep it in our regular skills again for quite a long time as well. So, and it's a blast finisher. Now, here's the other really, really fun thing about this Grandmaster, okay? Listen to this. It says that you can no longer lose heat unless you've overheated. So, right now, look at my bar. I've not been in Photon Forge, but because I've picked this Grandmaster, I'm stuck at 95 out of 100 heat. I'm stuck. So, can you see what they're doing with the design here? They're actually, you know, this is less quality of life in a way. The only way I can get rid of this heat now is by overheating. It says to me, no, you have to overheat. You have to go here, and you have to get kicked out. But don't worry, you'll get a huge explosion of damage, and you'll get 50% damage modifier, and you'll put burnout, and you'll do a blast finisher, and all of that stuff. But so, we still have the penalty that we can't go back into the forge until it's all run out. So this is like a totally different playstyle here, guys. See? And now finally I can go back in. And all this heat I build, I cannot get rid of unless I overheat it out. So it just completely turns on its head. This, to me, is exactly how traits should work. This is the best. This is where the trait system is at its best. It's playing around and totally turning on its head the various mechanics, right? So now I can stick myself at over 50% heat for good. And I can have my hard light arena out that's always really big. And I can have my half cooldown spectrum shield all the time. And as long as I never go back in the forge mode, I can enjoy this stuff, right? And I can get my 3 shields. But the only way I will get rid of this all is by doing this. Or I can stick at 50% heat and have a permanent 15% damage modifier. And on and on and on and on. So it's a very distinct line to the middle line that we were looking at. And very, very, very interesting. All right. So that leaves us with just the top line. So let's try and break combat so that we can do that for you guys. This is actually possible. Come on. I'm nowhere near those golems. I'm nowhere near those golems. How are we still in combat? This is going to be a bit of a running theme, I think. I'm actually so far away from them. This is going to be a running theme with these videos, I'm sure. We have to go all the way up the river. It would just be better to kill them. But then I'm scared another one will spawn and we'll cleave it accidentally. Okay, here we go. So, light density amplifier. The Photon Forge now reduces incoming damage while we're in it, but it has increased heat generation. So, this line is all about gaining heat faster. So, we get heat generation faster here. And we take less damage, quite a lot as well. By the way, 15% reduced damage is a lot, especially you can think of this too. So we can combo those together with the utility. Then we've got Crystal Configuration Storm. So each of these, you'll notice, you've got 3 different crystal configurations. You can go Zephyr, you can go Eclipse, or you can go Storm, all right? So Storm on the top line is that the skill 1 now fires projectiles, but it also generates extra heat. Now, finally, this Grandmaster is kind of the opposite of the one we just looked at. Photonic Blasting Module means you can never get rid of it unless you overheat. This one gives you a way of losing it without having to dip out of the forge. So this gives us Thermal Release Valve, which triggers Vent Exhaust, okay? So now, when we dodge roll, it acts as an attack. And that attack will drop our heat threshold. It vents heat 15% every time we dodge. And when we vent heat through that, we gain the healing from our miner too. So this, again, is a very different playstyle. This is a playstyle where instead of dipping in and out of the forge, what you can do is you can stay in the forge with your supercharged autos, and you can kind of periodically dodge. And if you've got a build that's got a lot of endurance generation from like sigils of energy and stuff, what you can do is you can build yourself to about 50% heat, and when you feel like you're getting a bit too hot, you can dodge to vent a little bit. You want to be watching my my meter there, and then you can just dodge as much as possible. So here we're overheating and I'm trying to dodge, and I got the dodge, but I slightly too late there, right? So that's another playstyle, and if you can push a lot of vigor onto yourself, you might be able to have fun with that. And that leads me actually onto synergies then. So there's the 3 lines. I think these are really cool. I love the design of these and how they play around with the heat mechanic. So what about synergies with the core specs? Well, I just mentioned Vigor. Don't forget that if you run tools, you can actually get Vigor on all your tool belt stuff, and tool belt can be triggered while you're in Photon Forge. It's totally fine. I actually like playing with tools quite a lot for the top lines here. I mean, kits, it doesn't really matter, obviously. I was just messing about with that before. You can run stuff like Takedown Round. I think by default, the game had everyone on explosives, so you were just doing all the crazy new core balance stuff as well, with sieges coming down from orbit and stuff while you were using your forge things, which is just ludicrous. But some things that I found quite fun. Under inventions, you can run double. You can instantly cool down your Coolant Blast, so you can get like double coolant vapor, and you can chain the Frost Aura for a lot longer. I was just showing the build where you take the top line and you try to give yourself lots of dodges. So that's got some interesting synergy with the new explosives line, where you get the Minesweeper trait that drops 3 mines as you dodge. So you're dodging, which is venting, which is healing. You're also putting out 3 burn. You're also putting out a packet of damage and 3 mines all at once, which is very fun. In fact, you can run a lot of different things with that. By default, they start us out with explosives, and you get the orbital strikes and all of that other stuff just happening naturally as you play. But I think really the most awesome synergy for the Holosmith is the Tools line. Tools is so useful. So Tools drops the cooldown of you being able to enter and exit the Forge. It gives you vigor on all of those F abilities, which you can trigger. Now, don't forget, they gave us basically a new version of Surprise Shot. So if you run Surprise Shot and that together, you can use Tool abilities very, very, very quickly on a Holosmith. Now, why is that cool? Why is that interesting? Well, actually, because of an old Grandmaster that now is actually quite worthwhile, and you've been seeing me use it on this video. I'm talking about Kinetic Battery. So Kinetic Battery is a Grandmaster that means whenever you use a tool belt skill, you gain a charge. And at 5 charges, I think it is, you gain super speed and quickness. Now, why this is so cool on the Holosmith is because you get these very spammable tool belt abilities anyway, but entering and exiting the Photon Forge is itself something that will give you kinetic battery charges, and it's super spammable. You can like double tap that, right? You can go in and go out very quickly, or go out and then go back in very quickly in one direction. So if you're doing that while spamming the little surprise shots and stuff, what you're doing is giving this super overpowered Photon Forge mode quickness and super speed on demand as you attack things, as you can see in the background footage here. It's really, really, really strong. So you get a lot of benefit out of tools. And you can run pretty much all of that together, by the way. You can be giving yourself lots of vigor so that you can vent heat, so that you can stay in, so that you can give yourself quickness. It's quite crazy. I heard some people saying, oh, it doesn't have much synergy with the rest of the class. I actually disagree. I think it's got a lot of interesting synergies with the rest of the class. And that's really where it starts to shine. The only thing it sort of loses a lot of is access to kits. But for years, let's be honest, engineers, what have we been overburdened with, overloaded with for years and years and years? Kits. So I kind of like that they made the Holosmith top level and elite specialization that just says straight away, all right, no kits at all, and we'll make it fun without the kits. And that really makes it a breath of fresh air. Kits are weird because, you know, when you look at the Scrapper, you could be running a Scrapper build but still using the grenade kit and it didn't feel very different. The Holosmith has taken very sincere measures to make it feel very new, and I think that's what engineers really should be wanting and should be looking for. It feels definitely like a new subclass, and that's the goal of the elite specializations. So there you go, guys. It is a pretty bonkers spec. I opened this video by wondering whether it's the design that's interesting or just the fact it hits like a truck, and I think it might be a little bit of both. I especially like the way that the Grandmasters work, and I can see why this one really has become a bit of a fan favorite for a lot of people. So let me know what you think if you're an engineer, how this has measured up for you. And I hope you guys will stick about for a couple more of these presentations coming up very soon. Hopefully I'll get to your main class in short order. We've done a light armor, we've done a medium armor. I guess next, let's go to heavy, shall we? That should be cool.